Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. We're all here gathered today in support of HB 1071 and SB 51, which seeks to discontinue a tool police have been using to justify racially profiling people, the odor or the alleged odor of marijuana. This important piece of legislation will be heard today in the House Judiciary Committee at 1 p.m. and is being championed by Delegate Charlotte Crutchfield, who represents District 19, and Senator Joe P. Carter, who represents District 41 in Baltimore City, and is also supported by the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus. Simply put, the war on drugs has always been a war on Black people. For decades, the alleged odor of marijuana has been used as an excuse to justify racial profiling and to perform warrantless stops and searches. And as we all know, as of July 1st, 2023, marijuana will be legal in Maryland. And there's absolutely no reason that the odor of a legal substance should continue to be used as a tool by law enforcement to stop and search people, especially when the police have such a shameful record of disproportionately stopping and searching Black people. Allowing police to continue to do so not only promotes lazy policing, but it perpetuates the stereotype of Black people as criminals, but it does nothing to increase public safety in our communities. With that said, we will now hear from our speakers. And so first we will hear from our wonderful bill sponsor, Delegate Crutchfield.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the support because we need it for HB 1071, which is going to be heard today in the House Judiciary Committee. So I'm Delegate Charlotte Crutchfield. I represent District 19 in Montgomery County. And the reason why I really sponsored this bill is because I think of my children. And right away, because I have raised a young Black man, I think about him being stopped by the police constantly. And he is now a college student, even though he's not locally. He is in Hampton, Virginia, going to college at Hampton University. But when he comes home, and when he's in any environment, I always think about the fact that he's going to be stopped no matter what. And I know in the state of Maryland, where we have legalized marijuana, that in July, in particular, if something is legalized, if we are saying a contraband is legalized, then that means that you should not be stopped because you smell like it. You should not be stopped for any reason whatsoever, because you're walking down the street, because you're in a car, whatever. And again, I go back to my own son, and I just think about the fact that that could happen to him. And I don't want to see that happen to him or any other citizen of Maryland who legally is possessing quantities of marijuana. There is no way. We have to stop that. And the only way we can do that is through legislation. We have legalized it through legislation. We are now going to be able to prevent the smell of odor as a reason to stop, search, detain, arrest anybody in this state because they smell like marijuana. So again, I appreciate all the support. I appreciate the OPD. I appreciate the ACLU and all of you here because you are needed. You are the ones that are going to make this happen for us in the state of Maryland. It has to be a push, not only with the legislation I have, but you coming out, you guys coming to my committee, you talking to my committee members and saying this has to be done. But let's take it even higher than that. Let's take it to the Speaker of the House. Let's take it to all of the various members of the House of Delegates and the Senate. Let's make sure this legislation is passed because it can be. But again, with all of your support and your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Delegate Crutchfield. Now we will hear from one of our partners in this work, Michelle Hall, Assistant Public Defender with the Office of Public Defender.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Hall, and I have the absolute privilege of serving as a public defender here in the state of Maryland. And every day in my work as a public defender, I see how Black and Brown Marylanders are disproportionately represented in every part of our criminal system. And that disproportionality and discrimination begins at the outset of a police interaction when an officer decides to use his discretion to stop a person or search their vehicle. Anything can happen after an interaction with police begins. It can be quick and an officer can send you on your way, or it can escalate to a search and arrest, use of force, including deadly force. One tool that is used and abused by police today is the alleged odor of marijuana to justify a stop or a search. Officers constantly claim they smell weed during a traffic stop, and under our current case law, that allegation alone is a blank check to infringe on people's Fourth Amendment right to privacy and conduct a stop or a search of the person or vehicle. Legalization of cannabis alone doesn't change this case law, and as long as there are any crimes related to cannabis on the books, police can claim they need to use its odor to justify a stop or a search. Our opponents would have you believe that any person or vehicle that smells like weed is an indication that someone is engaged in nefarious and violent drug trafficking, which is simply not the case. Not only is it unreasonable for an officer to be able to stop you on the street or search every inch of your vehicle based on the odor of legal odor of cannabis, but oftentimes it becomes clear that officers are lying. They are constantly lying about smelling any weed at all and are only making that allegation in a police report or to another officer on body camera to have a legal cover for an intrusion that would otherwise be illegal. Legalization of weed means absolutely nothing if Black and brown Marylanders continue to be disproportionately stopped, searched, harassed by police based on the odor and possession of it. We must pass HB 1071 and SB 51 to protect Marylanders, especially Black and brown Marylanders, who possess now legalized weed from this pernicious policing practice. I'm so grateful to our sponsors, two phenomenal Black women leaders, for introducing this legislation and for the unwavering support of the Legislative Black Caucus. I urge anyone who cares about rights to privacy, civil rights and liberty, and fundamental fairness to support us today and as we get this bill across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Which will stop police from using marijuana odor as a basis to detain and search people without a warrant. Because for one, as we all know what this country was built on, and when they so-called abolished slavery, all they did was make a loophole for it, which is called crimes. So they put these black codes, which started off as black codes against predominantly Black people, so that way they can put them in jail legally, as they say, for petty crimes. And over the years, we fought effortlessly. Every stitch on my clothing, somebody died for me to have it. Everything I have, somebody died for me to have. Even me speaking out here, died for me to have. So we still fighting this constant fight. I don't know when it's going to end, but we trying right now to end one of the biggest bills that will affect a lot of people. And not only me is affected, my peers. I know people of several stories who got detained from this odor smell that wasn't even an odor smell, but they took them like to jail because of their so-called smell. So this goes deep, and this is a big one because this is one of the biggest loopholes that they use to try to, wiggle their way in, just to put us under the ground for real. Because when you put somebody in jail, you basically put them underground, like for real. So me, I had several instances. Like I'm gonna try to get through all of them, but several instances all started from the so-called smell of marijuana. One of the instances, I was literally on York Road and I was parked, and the police started harassing my passenger in my car, and he was like, "Oh, you wasn't parked." First they said, "Oh, you wasn't parked close enough to the curb." 10 officers came. I recorded all these instances that I got, so I have proof. 10 officers came and said, "Oh, you wasn't parked close enough." Then they started harassing my passenger. And then they got close enough and said, "Oh, we smell marijuana." They took my key out my car and wouldn't give me my key out my car until I showed them my ID. And when they finally wrote on the citation, they put, "Oh, warrant check." But they used that to search my car, and like several other instances, I was followed from like in the same areas. Like I ain't even had window tint on my front windshield or nothing, and they still, managed to pull me over and they said so-called tint. That was another instance. They followed me from 2 miles off the highway to work, and they were saying, "Oh, my tent." And then next thing you know, he said, "Oh, it smelled like weed." Searched my car. I was trying to watch him and record him. He put me in handcuffs and put me in his car. And then the lady took my phone, and then she asked him, "Can I give it back to him?" And then he said, "Yeah." But they basically, I felt so violated on all these incidents. Like I was helpless. I couldn't do nothing. So I'm steady trying to find my way and trying to find like what can I do. And we do have laws that we either not knowledgeable about, and we have power that we don't know that we have. So me, I've been through so many instances, like even the one like probably the same 10 officers pulled me over 10 times. I said 10 times, I meant 3 times. And they said the smell of marijuana, and it was like a group of them. So they basically tried to, like, they basically the biggest gangs in America. So they basically ganged up on me, and through the grace of God, I'm still right here because any of these situations could have went left. And tragically, it's some situations that did go left as I'm speaking right now. But through God and my mother, that's always guiding me and telling me to do things the right way, and that's why I'm still here. So another thing is well, it's not my last instance, but it was in the middle of the instances. The officer pulled me over up Towson. He said my headlight was out. That led to smell like marijuana. Then he asked me, what am I even doing up Towson? As if I didn't belong. So as you can see, they use these so-called laws and policies to wiggle their way in and target us black and brown and minority people. They do it every day, and they're using these policies and laws to do so. So if we want to do anything, we got to tackle everything that's built from America have a bias in it because of this slavery. Like everything from AI, the black young lady found out that there was a bias in the AI software that it only can recognize, white faces. So it's a bias in every single thing that we have to just fight one by one. But this one of the biggest ones. And I'm just speaking from the heart. I wrote a lot of stuff, but I can't get to everything. But I'm mainly trying to get to the main things. And like when I was on Alameda, when they pulled me over, followed me, 10 officers hopped out in 2 cars. They arrested me. And that's how I know it's not a race thing, because it was mainly black officers that did it. And the white lady was trying to figure out what was going on. And then they started messing with her and gave her a ticket. I recorded everything. So it's like the color of your skin doesn't determine your tribe, your ethnic tribe. It's the way you think that determines your tribe. And I got that from 19 Keys. So being as though we said that, it's not even a race war, because we have, all different colors of people that's fighting these same fights with us. So we gotta keep trying every day and make a way, because if it don't affect you, it might affect your kids. Like the lady was saying, it will affect us all because of the color of our skin, no matter what status you have or anything. They don't even want you there to begin with, and they trying to wait till you mess up so they can take it from you using these so-called crimes, and put you in jail. So I got a lot more to say, but I'm gonna save it for another time because I don't want to take up too much of your time, and we shall overcome.
Next, we'll hear from Don Dalton, a fearless leader with the American Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability, and co-founder of the Justice Initiative and an impacted mother.
So I had something planned to read, but this young man just gave me life. So I'm just thank you for that. Again, my name is Dawn Dalton. I'm the co-founder of the Justice Initiative. I'm also a core member of MCJPA. And more importantly, I am the mother of Lupe Hawkins, a young black man from Prince George's County that was racially profiled, pulled over for really no apparent reason, beaten, assaulted, charged, and just dragged through the system. And so I stand here today in solidarity with everyone, knowing that we have to get HB 1071, SB 51 passed. It is imperative. There is no reason why, if marijuana will be considered completely legalized, recreational marijuana, on July 1st, 2023, why would odor ever be a reason for a police to come up to any of us and use that as an opening to any type of interaction whatsoever? We know it's biased, we know it's racially biased, we know it is a tool that is used to hem up our young people in the judicial system. It has to stop. And I would actually question why any opposition would oppose this if you had any stake in community relations, making things better between the community and policing. It's time for us to do better. It's time for us to be better. It's time for us to get this law passed so that our young people can feel safe, just like their young people feel safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dawn. And next we will hear from Davon Love with Leaders of Beautiful Struggle.
All right, good afternoon. As was mentioned, I'm Davon Love from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. A lot of what we heard today is evidence of the fact that the collective American consciousness has internalized notions of white supremacy, notions of inherent Black pathology and criminality, and it shows up in the policies and practices of the major institutions in the society. And if we're honest, the presence of Black people and cannabis evokes such strong societal stigmas of Black criminality that in many ways it shows up in policies and practices, but in many ways it projects things onto the society we live in that aren't there. And what do I mean by that? Law enforcement will argue that cannabis prohibition policies have been an effective or necessary tool for public safety and law enforcement. When we look at the way that it's used, right, and we look at the fact that law enforcement, the underlying assumption of this idea that law enforcement needs odor is this idea that drug trafficking is, in our current society, a major driver of violence in our communities. What's interesting about that is that back in January, the director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement in Baltimore City gave a presentation to the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And they gave numbers, homicide numbers in 2020 and 2021 of one of the traditionally most violent districts in Baltimore City, the Western District. Only 14.5% of the homicides committed in that district were associated with drug trafficking. And if you look at many of the patterns of how violence emerges in our community, a lot of them stem from interpersonal disputes that just go out of control, right? But if you think about what law enforcement is trying to convince us of, they're trying to convince us that drug trafficking is a huge problem and that cannabis prohibition policy is a way to get at drug trafficking to address violence. Law enforcement has produced no evidence that this is an effective public safety strategy. And we demand that those who are opposing this legislation on those grounds present that evidence. We know no such evidence exists. But it's important for us to know that when we think about the impact of racism and white supremacy, it is that a belief that has no basis in fact is driving the policies that govern how law enforcement is interacting with our community and the policies they support. And so I mention this because it's important that we have ammunition against the opposition that will claim that we need these policies in the light of the fact that the people who are most harmed are people of African descent, people of color more broadly. And so for that, we need HB 1071, Senate Bill 51 to pass. Thank you.
And next we'll hear from Carl Snowden with the Caucus of African American Leaders. Thank you.
Let me, Delegate, thank you, and thank Senator Carter. And I want to thank you because you get it. As a legislator, it's important that we have systemic changes in America. For those of us who've been around, we understand that how you can take the smell of marijuana and that can develop into someone's death. Having watched the last decade, and particularly thinking of the young people, I happen to have two sons, adult sons, and grandchildren. And for those of us that understand history, we know that these events that occur in people's lives change them forever. When President Barack Obama spoke during the great crisis that involved the death of Trayvon Martin, one of the things he said was, "This could be my son," referring to Trayvon Martin. When I think of America today and I think of the young people who were born in the year 2000, they would be 23 years old. And in their lifetime, they have seen many instances with police. Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, Freddie Gray, Antoine Black. Young people dying often at the hands of police officers. I think it's so important that this legislation get passed, but in addition to that, I think it's time for us to make crystal clear something. It's something that is different from what our elders have been telling us for too many years. When you run into a bigoted police, they say, what I would advise you to do is keep your mouth shut, keep quiet, survive this incident. And that's the advice that we've been telling our young people. And the truth of the matter is, it's bad advice. Because if you look at the year 2023 we're in, 100 years ago, Black parents were telling young people, keep your mouth shut, be quiet. 1823, they were saying the same thing. There comes a time when we have to make it crystal clear that we refuse to live in a society where because you happen to be Black, or you happen to have a different color, or you speak a different language, that treating people differently is the way it is in life. That's not the America we want to live in. So I see what the delegate and the state senator putting this bill in. It's really a clarion call to change the way America operates. There's nobody here who do not know that Black people get racially profiled every single day. Having this tool that the police have used, smelling of marijuana, has indeed led to people being arrested. Maryland has more African-American young men in prison than any state in the nation, including Mississippi. That's not by accident. That's not by coincidence. That's not by happenstance. It's because policies that have been promulgated, generally with police departments, that have led to this end result. So not only do I think we need to be supporting the delegate and the state senator Carter who's put this forward, but I think we again need to use this opportunity to make clear to the powers that be that the Maryland that we want is not the Maryland of the past. We want a Maryland where people, children, young people, will have an opportunity to walk any street in the state, any streets in Maryland, and not be harassed based on the color of their skin. And I conclude with this. One of my great experiences in terms of living, I've had that experience. I know what it means when a police officer comes up to you and says, I smell marijuana odor. I've seen how police treat one group of people versus another. 2 years ago in Ocean City, Black kids were harassed. And they were doing nothing more than what their counterparts were doing, having a great time, smoking marijuana. But the police officers in that instance decided to use the smelling of marijuana as a pretext to be able to do all kinds of things to these young people. And fortunately, they were able to get the support of the caucus, of African American leaders and others, and we were able to turn that around. But that's not the way it should be. And so I support the legislation and would encourage the General Assembly to pass it. And I am convinced that Governor Moore will sign it because he believes in this concept, leave no one behind. Thank you.
And next we'll hear from Martin Mitchell, who's the political action chair with the Maryland State NAACP Conference.
Greetings. Pleasure to be here today. As you said, I'm the political action chair for the Maryland State Conference of the NAACP. I'm also a councilman at large for the city of Laurel. And some people coin me, I know the Post coined me the cannabis councilman. I've been a medical patient and advocate for several years. I spoke at the last hearing on the odor. And one of the staunchest things that I remember is that who was the opposition? The opposition was state's attorneys, sheriff departments, right? And so one of the things that they mentioned was taking away their tool, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a tool. Taking away their tool to search people's vehicles, taking away their tool to do law enforcement. But one of the gentlemen behind me, from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, pointed out that there's still ways in the hearing for them to do their job without, searching somebody's car on the pretext of marijuana and cannabis. One of the biggest things I've mentioned is the ambiguity of the smell of cannabis in the hearing. And that's important because CBD has been legal for several years, but also smells like cannabis. There's several other herbs and plants that also smell like cannabis. You know, I remember sharing an ACLU post on Facebook, and you know, I always read the comments because that's where you really learn, like, you know, people's true intentions and how they feel. So one of the ladies said, you know, good for him. He, you know, it smelled like marijuana, which means that's indicative that he smoked marijuana that day. And you saw everybody else chime in like, lady, have you ever touched the plant? Have you ever consumed the plant? Have you ever been around the plant? Because the thought is, it's like, I'm not gonna lie. As I said, I'm a cannabis consumer, right? So I might smoke weed on Monday, and on Friday, it still smells like that in my car, right? That doesn't mean that I lit up that morning or that day. And so that's one of the things to point out. Me being a city council person in my own hometown, I tell the story all the time that, you know, I interacted with the police so many times as a young Black person growing up. And, you know, probably 100 times pulled over, you know, walking, driving, and there's a few stories I want to share. One time walking, you know, I remember me and my friends, we were smoking a joint. I think one of the neighbors called, we were walking through the apartment. By the time the police came, the joint was gone, but they still smelled marijuana on us. And so, of course, all of them, they wouldn't let us leave the premise without being searched. And I remember one of my friends refused to be searched. And so, like, they told us to walk away, you know, and the thought is, like, we're not gonna walk away. We're not gonna walk away while you search him. We're gonna stand right there while you search him to make sure that everything is on the up and up. Because like you said, these are before body cameras. So you had to just go by, you know, this is what happened. Hopefully there's a neighbor looking outside. But there was another time, you know, they searched us in a vehicle. And I remember that they were so upset that they couldn't find cannabis. They asked my friend to open his mouth and then scrape marijuana off his tongue. And I remember at that date, you know, I was like, this gotta be illegal. But I remember just being like a 22, 21-year-old. And I remember it was bullying tactics. I even thought about joining the military. And he was saying to me, oh, I'm gonna tell your recruiter and this, that, and the third. And I don't even remember why he knew that, but you know, it was bullying tactics that he used. And the last story I will tell you was, I remember driving and had a group of friends, and you know, again, they smelled cannabis. They saw, you know, Black males in the car, and they searched the car. All they found was cannabis flakes on the floor. I remember one of the officers looking and was like, pull out the Scotch tape. So really, he planned to pull out the Scotch tape and start getting the cannabis flakes off of the floor. Of course, it never went to fruition because they knew that this wouldn't hold up in court, but they just wanted to waste our time. And so I bring you back to the point of the cannabis smell is ambiguous. And then also, why are we punishing people for now a legal substance? I mean, I can argue that it should have always been, you know, legal. And we're pushing at extreme speeds to make sure that this adult use market opens, right? So how about we push for the same speeds for criminal justice reform, for reparative justice? And, you know, with that being said, you know, pass HB 1071 and SB 51 today. Thank you.
And lastly, we'll hear from Delegate Deborah Davis. She is the chair of the Criminal Justice Subcommittee of the Legislative Black Caucus and also just a champion of this issue as well. So thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Ms. Emanuel. I come to the podium without a script, so you're in trouble. Well, I'm in trouble. As she mentioned, my name is Delegate Deborah Davis. I'm from District 28 in Charles County. I do sit as the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, and I want to mention the largest Black caucus in the state of Maryland. How dare we stand aside and let people get pulled over because they stink? There have been a lot of reasons why we've been pulled over historically. Because you're in the wrong neighborhood, because you're in the right neighborhood where it's been over-policed, so it's a high crime area. The idea that we're gonna legalize a substance and then pull people over because they smell like it is ludicrous. I'm telling you that this is a big deal. Over the summer, we had a meeting with the OPD, the Office of Public Defenders, with all the advocates, and the number one priority was to make sure that we did not move forward with police being able to stop and search for a legal substance. I submit to you that when Marylanders voted overwhelmingly for the legalization of cannabis, it wasn't because it was going to make the state billions of dollars. It was because we were tired, sick and tired of being sick and tired of having our young people arrested and stopped and searched because of marijuana. It's a failed war on drugs, and if we move forward with legalizing cannabis and still keep these laws in effect, we have failed. Thank you.
Davis, and now we'll open up for any questions.
When would it take effect, when it's, if and when it's passed? Would it take effect when the legalization happens in July?
As amended, yes.
And a question for everybody here, in terms of what Martin Mitchell was saying, how frustrated are you that this is not as pressing an issue along with the taxation of legalized marijuana, the structure being set up, the push for that this is not as urgent as that effort, that you have to come to this point to propose a bill to get people to notice that this is still a problem and that this has to be codified into law?
I'll say extremely upset.
Yes.
I'll leave that way.
I would say as a mother of a young black male,
You can talk about it.
I would say as the mother of a young black male who has been directly impacted and a mother who interacts with a number of young black males who have been directly impacted by to me, it's excessive use of force almost. When an officer utilizes odor to stop or interact with an individual, you know what they're doing it for. They're doing it as an open door to get to the next place, right? And so you're taking these young people and you're literally dragging them through the criminal justice system. And I do want to make another point that I didn't make earlier. Please be clear. When you traumatize this young man, you traumatize his entire family. It's not just him that is fighting this. It's his mother, it's his siblings, it's his grandparents, it's everybody. So it is very frustrating. And we also completely understand why this is not that important to others, because it's affecting us. It's not affecting them. So it's very frustrating.
One other quick question. Senator, there is another bill, Senator Wallstreicher, he's proposing a pilot program to essentially have police test for cannabis concerning driving under the influence of cannabis. Do you think there's going to be some confusion between this pilot program that they're proposing and this effort here, that police, and the whole situation may be confusing in terms of what do I do in terms of maybe proposing this test to somebody who's been pulled over as opposed to just, abiding by this law? Is there going to be too much confusion concerning that particular pilot program?
It will be confusing, and again, I think it's intentional, and I will turn the mic over to y'all to add. Thank you.
To your last point, she'd like to add a comment.
So why it's very important for me is because I'm a federal worker, right? So for me, it's still illegal. I have a grandson that's seen daily at NIH with a rare condition. In order to keep his weight, they gave him marijuana capsules, for lack of a better term. I don't know what the proper term is, to keep his weight up. When this becomes legal, I would be more than thrilled to know that my grandson can legally purchase and smoke marijuana if that's what he needs, okay? For me, if I allow him to do that in my home and I leave out, I would fear of being stopped because I was in the same room with him. Fear that I could lose employment because of that stop. So it's very frightening to me that the proper laws are not in place. He's already fighting for his life because of a rare disease. And on top of this, he's going to fight for his life to survive because of what it takes to help him survive. So there you have it.
Can I get your name?
My name's Tamara McKinney.
And I would quickly say a lot of the resistance that we've heard kind of informally is around DUIs. And one of the things that we've said in response is that the issue of law enforcement being able to solely rely on odor as a pretext for search and seizure doesn't solve that problem, right? The idea of wanting to address DUIs is a separate but related issue. The science on assessing a person's level of impairment has not caught up to where it is with alcohol. And so I think the point that I think is implicit in your question, it's important that we're clear that the conversation that we're trying to have is a conversation about when a law enforcement officer gets probable cause of that odor by itself. With alcohol, you have to notice impairment before the smell or any other characteristics are appropriate in terms of a stop. And so likewise with cannabis, if the issue is stopping DUIs, this doesn't solve that problem, right? I think Wall Street, the bill that you referenced, it's a pilot program, but again, the science needs to be developed in order for them to do that. And there's no way around that. There's no way around the fact that we don't currently have an instrument that allows one to test impairment through cannabis in a way that one would feel like it deters DUIs as a problem.
I guess my question was, will it undermine this bill, even as they're doing it out in the field, where police are actually going to have these, if it passes, and these devices, they're saying, you know, if you do this for me, instead of doing it out of the field, where it could potentially spill into something else, where it's on this pilot program, and then all of a sudden they're smelling, the undermining of this effort is the question I have.
No, it shouldn't. As Mr. Love mentioned, one of the things is to just remember, again, this is about not being able to stop people for the sole reason of the smell of cannabis. Now, what Senator Wallstreicher's bill is attempting to do is to create a machine, okay? He's creating that machine that will allow them to detect the possibility of impairment through cannabis, which are totally separate and distinct things, okay? So that's what you need to understand, all right? We're talking about separate and distinct things here, okay?
This is a question for you. Don't you find it very problematic that a government official is trying to start a pilot program to test for marijuana, using the police to stop people that are Black and brown to test this actual product that doesn't actually exist at this point? Because there is no test right now that they can go out on the street and test for marijuana. So he's trying to create a program, not in a lab, but on the streets of America to test using Black and brown individuals primarily, I can guarantee you that, to test a product. Don't you find that problematic? I know you're not here to answer questions, but I understand. But it's problematic that they're not trying to create a test in a lab and test it and allow people to voluntarily have themselves participate in this test program. They are trying to use people on the street. They are trying to use citizens to test a product that does not exist at this point in time.
You asked my question.
So there is a problem with that. And the fact that a government official is actually trying to back something like that is actually scary. And it shows that they're not trying to do what's in the best interest of their constituents, that they're trying to do what's in the best interest of their pockets. Because I can guarantee you that they have some vested interest in this product that they are willing to test on innocent people.
So I wanted to add one comment, and it was about, of course, being upset about the criminal justice reforms and the economic side of it. You know, one of the things that I realized, I had visited a lot of the dispensaries and cultivation centers in like the marijuana industry, and you know, surprisingly enough, when I met the people, a lot of them are former law enforcement. You know, and I thought that was shocking because a lot of them profited off of, you know, criminalizing Black and brown people, and then they're now in an industry that's thriving. You know, it's an immature market, still going to become a mature market. But they had the resources to get in, right? They had the know-how that this was coming down the pipeline. You know, I talked to several Black and brown people who have been criminalized every day who are still trying to figure out how to get into the legal market. And so one of my biggest concerns about HB 556 that I brought up was the armed enforcement unit. You know, we're legalizing a substance, then creating an armed enforcement unit in the name of protecting the economy. No, that armed enforcement unit is just going to target the same people who they've already been targeting. Right, the people who couldn't obtain licenses legally, and so that was my biggest problem. And I think they amended that part of it, but you know, I just wanted to add that piece.
The only thing that I would add on the frustration is that for me, and I think for many public defenders and the way we see this impacting our clients, it is a trap. Legalization is a trap. If people can still be stopped, their vehicles searched based on odor alone. Today, we constantly have cases where it is the same fact pattern. There's a traffic stop. I smell cannabis, whether they smell anything or not. And they use that in order to search people's vehicles. And the first thing that a client always says is, how can they do that? This is, it's decriminalized, or how can they do that? I have a medical marijuana license. That's what's constantly happening right now. And it's a trap when you're setting people up to be not only arrested, not only harassed, and not only uncomfortable in their own communities, but harmed and killed if the police can still use odor cannabis alone to justify those types of intrusions. And so not only is it frustrating, but it's scary, because this isn't, like everyone's been talking about, these are people's lives. These are our clients' lives, our family members' lives that are at risk, that are in jeopardy. That confusion alone can be a thing that takes an interaction from 0 to 100. And so that's why, for many, many reasons, we need to pass this bill, and it needs to be in effect by July 1st, because another thing that a lot of the opponents will say is that this can be handled through litigating these cases in the courts. And I can tell you that for a case to go all the way up to the Supreme Court of Maryland, that takes years. And in the process, people are going to be harmed, harassed, and continue to be stopped for their vehicle search based on odor alone. And that's simply unacceptable while we have this booming legal cannabis market.
And the last thing I will say is that, and just to add on to what Michelle just shared, is that for some of our folks, this is a matter of life or death. And it has been. And it's absolutely important that we pass this immediately. Otherwise, like she mentioned, legalizing would be absolutely useless for our people. So I think that then concludes our press conference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.